Bonus video today. Sometimes the best thing about new parts coming out is that the prices on the old parts get discounted. And I don't mean used. This is build as everything's new. But I think budget builds are kind of back. And it's been really a long time since I've been able to throw together a $700 build that would give you anything near this type of performance level. I mean, during the dark times of the GPU apocalypse, you'd be lucky to get like integrated graphics on like a 5600G or something like that. Well, so what did I throw together here? Now, I'm not sponsored by PC Part Picker or anything, but I think it's a good place to throw together the build. And I'm gonna like shrink myself to be super tiny and out of the way here so we can talk about it. So I've noticed that AMD's Ryzen 5 5600 CPU is now available using an instant promo code. So this isn't available at all retailers and all that. This one is at Newegg right now with an instant promo code, but that's not a rebate where you have to send it in or anything like that. For $130 once you apply that code. $130, guys, compared to if you're getting the next generation, Ryzen 5 7600 XT, which is still at $300 plus the platform cost. Now, a Ryzen 5 5600 is still a very, very, very capable gaming CPU and will only bottleneck extremely strong GPUs at low resolutions. Now, this build is definitely targeting either 1080p or you could get by with 1440p, but with the settings reduced a little bit in the more demanding titles. Now, the motherboard here, I'm going to admit you could get a much better motherboard, but this is one of the cheapest B550 motherboards available. And so it's $90, it's less than $100. It's not the greatest, but here's the thing. You're on a Ryzen 5 5600. This doesn't need the like super powerful VRMs or anything like that. And the other thing I like to check for is to avoid any kind of compatibility issues. I did double check that this motherboard has QFlash, which is you can update the BIOS without installing the CPU, memory, and GPU. In other words, if the BIOS isn't compatible with the Ryzen 5 5600 out of the box, which if you go to like older generation AM4 platforms, things like that, sometimes they might not be compatible out of the box, and some of them will need a CPU installed to update the BIOS. You see the problem. So I did double check that despite this being cheap, it's not the greatest. It will fit the CPU. The CPU doesn't need the greatest motherboard in the world, and it will have that QFlash available if you need it, so you can update to the appropriate BIOS. Now, speaking of not buying the greatest thing in the world, 16 gigabytes of RAM isn't the greatest thing in the world, and 3600 CL18 isn't the fastest RAM in the world. But the vast majority of games are going to be fine with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you're not really going to be hampered in gaming performance by your memory speeds unless you're CPU limited. But like I said, the 5600 combined with this RAM is not going to be CPU limiting you in a lot of situations unless you're like playing esports at extremely low settings and resolutions, in which case you're probably getting enough frame rates. Guys, if you can't get the kill at 200 frames per second, you probably weren't going to get the kill at 230 frames per second with better memory. Anyway, I was able to fit a 1 terabyte solid state drive. This is a PCI 3.0 NVMe. And the nice thing about the PCI 4.0 NVMe's getting cheaper and PCIe 5.0 NVMe's getting like on the horizon and supported on the new AM5 platform from AMD is that PCI 3.0 is getting cheap. Guys, this is a 1 terabyte NVMe drive for $58. Is it the best one in the world? No. Is it going to be fast enough that your system feels good and games load quickly? Yes. And it's only $58 for a 1 terabyte NVMe drive. And how about the video card? This was once again a really exciting deal that I spotted today, where Newegg, and I'm not sponsored by them and I don't get any money from their links or anything like that, $265 for a 6650 XT. A 6650 XT is a very, very good 1080p GPU and will even kind of get the job done at 1440p with some settings turned down in the most demanding games. Now, I only have a RX 6600 5600 myself. The 50 version has just slightly faster memory, maybe a slightly faster core clock, I can't remember, but the performance is usually less than 5% difference, but the 6650 XT is actually, a little bit better than the 6600 XT. And again, with this deal, this is coming in at $265. Now, the Eagle cooler isn't the best in the world, but this is a 3-fan cooler on a GPU that doesn't generate a lot of heat. This thing should be just fine. Now, throw that into a case where all the parts fit. Feel free to spend more on your case, but I just went ahead and grabbed one that seemed to at least come with one fan and some kind of a open-looking front, as far as I could tell in the picture. Had some reasonable reviews. People say good airflow, all of that. Obviously, there are much better cases in the world, but this one is only $55, and I think all your parts will fit. And it's looking like Superflower is selling their 650, their LED-X3 brand. By the way, if you don't know Superflower, people are like, is that some weird no-name brand that's going to destroy my PC? No, Superflower LED-X3s are actually extremely reliable. I use the 850-watt LED-X3 Gold in my actual PC I'm filming this video on right now that I do my benchmarking on, all of that. Now, I have an 850-watt version. This is 650 watts, but that's more than enough not only for this GPU, but you should be able to upgrade to a future mid-range GPU in further, years ahead of the game, and you should be just fine. And again, there's a deal going on this, so this is a very good quality 650-watt power supply for $65, plus it has some RGB on it, which, as we all know, will make your games go so much faster. Anyway, so we're coming in at barely over $700 for one heck of a PC. Now, I really think this is fantastic. No, I'm not including the operating system in that because there's disagreements on whether you should get one super cheap on a gray market or not, so that's up to you. And then the other thing I'll mention is if you wanted to spend a little bit more, where could you do that? The Ryzen 5 5600 comes with a stock cooler. It will get you the performance that you need out of it. It might be a little bit loud, it might be a little bit hot, so feel free to throw in a budget CPU cooler onto this PC, and you could, that would help out, but I don't think you're actually gonna see a lot of performance gains. That's gonna be more of a temperature gain. Feel free to spend more on the motherboard for something a little bit more reliable, a little bit higher end, something that you'd feel comfortable sticking in like a 5800X3D in the future if you wanted to, that kind of a thing. But again, this one should get the job done. You could jump up to 32 gigabytes of RAM instead of 16 if you want a little bit more future proofing. You could also go with higher memory speeds. But again, if you do that, all of this stuff starts to add up and we start moving towards a $1,000 build that doesn't have much more performance than what I'm showing you here for $700. You can always add in more SSDs in the future, so I actually think you're fine with 1 terabyte at first, and then you can buy more. But feel free to buy more now if you know you like to have a lot of games installed. Are you the kind of person who has 15 games installed and you're jumping back and forth between them, or do you just play one game for a while, finish it, uninstall it, move on to the next one? You might know how much space you need. You could even save a few dollars by going down to 500 gigabytes if you only keep one game installed at a time. The video card would be the best place to upgrade your performance, but the 6650 XT at this price, $265, is such an incredible price to performance that you're gonna have to go significantly more expensive to get much more performance right now. So I really think this is the absolute sweet spot for 1080p and mid-range 1440p gaming. But if you did want to, you could upgrade the GPU, and that would be the biggest performance impact to upgrading the build. Like I said, there's better cases out there. You could research those separately. Honestly, this is a great power supply for this build. But, I guess if you wanted to fit, RTX 3080 in the future when they're used and cheap, maybe go up to 750 or 850 watts. But like I said, I really think this is great and could handle a mid-range GPU. Because the thing is, when you're thinking about how big of a power supply do you need for your build, you need to factor in the parts you're actually using. The Ryzen 5 5600 is a very low power CPU, which means you can actually fit a very power hungry GPU and still not be using a lot of power on these parts, and 650 watts Honestly, guys, I think you could probably go up to a 3080 on this. I don't want to guarantee it, but like 650 watts with the rest of the system not drawing a whole lot does actually give you decent headroom. And like I said, Superflower LED X3s are good parts. I hope this was useful for somebody. I hope all of you have an excellent day.